Well, the V&A Museum has been mocked and ridiculed for naming Margaret Thatcher on a list of so-called unpopular figures, alongside the likes of Adolf Hitler and Osama bin Laden. Hitler, of course, murdered 6 million Jews on his deranged mission to conquer Europe, engineering the Holocaust as one of the worst crimes humanity has ever seen. Amongst other atrocities, bin Laden masterminded the murder of nearly 3,000 Americans and others on September the 11th, when hijackers flew planes into New York's World Trade Centers. Thatcher, meanwhile...
The ladies not for turning.
It's just evil, isn't it? The V&A Museum, headed up by ex-Labour MP Tristram Hunt, no coincidence there, is now facing calls to have its public funding axed. But what do you think? Is Margaret Thatcher a hero or a villain? Let me know your thoughts. Email me gbviews@gbnews.com. Tweet me at GBNews. And while you're there, make sure you vote in our poll. I'll bring you the results in a few short minutes. But look, who better to debate this now than Maggie's former aide, Nile Gardiner, and author and broadcaster Jeni Barnett. Thank you very much. Great to have you both on the show. Niall, I'll start with you. Your thoughts at Margaret Thatcher being put on the same pedestal as Hitler and bin Laden?
Patrick, thank you for having me on the show today. It's absolutely outrageous what you've just described with the V&A Museum. It's an insult. It's absolutely appalling. You basically have woke leftists now in charge, claiming that Margaret Thatcher is on par with Hitler and Osama bin Laden. And this is an absolute outrage. Frankly, the V&A should have its public funding taken away because it's engaging here in political activity. And this attack on Margaret Thatcher, I think, is just a huge insult to her memory. She was someone who lived her life for the sake of the British people. She won 3 general elections in a row. She turned Britain from the sick man of Europe into an economic powerhouse. She took on the might of the Soviet Empire alongside Ronald Reagan and defeated the Russians. She also, of course, led the liberation of the Falkland Islands. So many great achievements. The British people, I think, should be immensely grateful to Margaret Thatcher for her leadership, for her record. She's greatly missed today.
Yeah, I mean, Jeni, surely you'd have to concede that she's, I mean, even a worst critic wouldn't put her on the same bracket as Hitler, for goodness sake.
They are not saying that she is like Hitler. They are talking about unpopular figures. She was unpopular. There are always 2 ways to skin a cat. There were those that thought she was wonderful and the second coming, and those who saw a woman after elocution lessons superciliously pouring scorn on the working class. We've always had an issue with our class system, but Thatcher fueled the flames of dissent. Proud miners, steel workers, proud hard-working communities. She demonized them all. And of course, she was not like Hitler, who was a deranged lunatic, but Thatcher was cruel and calculating. She was a snob. She broke the unions and she flew in the face of egalitarianism. According to Thatcher, there was no such thing as society. Today, its legacy lingers on. It's I'm all right, Jack. All for one and one for one. She was the godmother of division, and the vulnerable in society are fighting. Then they had to fight to survive. Now they're fighting to survive. And you can only look at a society in how they treat their vulnerable. And Margaret Thatcher couldn't give her monkeys.
OK, Niall, you're going to have to defend Maggie's honour here.
Yeah, well, I'll have to respond to that unhinged rant because it was completely crazy, frankly, really. One of the craziest things I've heard on TV in years, frankly. Margaret Thatcher actually stood up for working class Britons, millions of whom actually voted for Margaret Thatcher in 3 general elections. She took on actually the evils of socialism. And she fought for the working man. She stood up, of course, to the nefarious. She stood up to the nefarious trade unions, actually, who are suppressing the workers. Frankly, she greatly enhanced living standards across the United Kingdom, with very good reason. She won 3 general elections in a row. She didn't lose. She won those elections because British people rallied around her, and they supported a leader who stood for the British people, who fought for the British people. and who really exemplified, I think, what is so great about Britain, really. And that was Margaret Thatcher.
OK, look, Jeni, people can see straight through this, all right? You've got a woke museum here, headed up by an ex-Labour MP, Tristram Hunt, you know, sticking Margaret Thatcher in the same bracket as Bin Laden. It's all very well and good you saying there's a nuanced difference there. When a lot of people walk through the V&A, they're going to see Thatcher in the same bracket as Bin Laden and Hitler. They might not look into it as much as you, especially young people. They're just going to see her as that. They're trying to rewrite history, Jeni.
I think that's not true. I think that standing up, she was unpopular for millions and millions of people. If you came from a mining community, Nile, and you had no money and you were striking for your rights, you were fighting against a woman that was held up by the state. She won 3 elections. There was nobody else to stand to do what she did. And she was powerful, but she was careless and she was ruthless. And she divided our country, divided it so much that you had Nottingham miners fighting Nottingham miners, and you had the police fighting and bashing people's heads with. And you say that it's a rant and that you've never heard anything so stupid. If you look at the working class, they were confused. And Margaret Thatcher rode in, and even in the end, she didn't have support from her own people. She didn't have support from the Tory party. And they are using the very puppet that she was used by, Spitting Image. And with that very famous sketch when she asked what did she want to have for dinner, she said, I'll have meat. And they said, what about the vegetables? And she said, they'll have what I have. She was dangerous.
Right.
Could I respond to that?
Yeah.
Please. Millions upon millions of working class Britons voted for Margaret Thatcher. There's a reason why she won those 3 elections in a row, because they supported her policies. And
yes, but look
she
at
also
the legacy she
came from a humble
Jeni.
background herself. Actually, and she was a greengrocer's daughter. She came from a humble background. She did not come from the elite classes at all. Many of those elites, of course, are condemning Margaret Thatcher today, and this woke attack on Thatcher by the V&A is absolutely unacceptable. There should be consequences for this. And why on earth is the Conservative government giving any money to this museum when it's engaging in political activism?
All right, Jeni, you'd have just let the Argentinians have the Falkland Islands, would you, Jeni?
No, listen, let me ask you a question. Do you believe in democracy?
Me? Well, yes. I mean, you know,
I know you
we're going to do how many more rhetorical questions we're going to do here, Jeni?
Of course we do. And Margaret Thatcher won 3 democratic elections. That's a big achievement. She's a champion of democracy.
If you believe in democracy, then a museum is putting up an exhibition which will have people talking and thinking. And millions of working class who she wanted to move up into the higher echelon. It
doesn't have the right to engage in political activism on the taxpayer's dime here. That's unacceptable. That's out of order.
Neither do you have the right to dismiss other people's opinions. In my opinion, the woman was dangerous. And given that she had elocution lessons to make her more acceptable, I think she was, and her legacy still is lingering. We have a selfish society, a ruthless society, and you don't care, and I do.
That's just bizarre. That's really bizarre.
All right, we'll leave it there. We'll leave it there. Both of you, thank you very much. Kareem. All right, a V&A museum spokesman said, we are always open to feedback from visitors in response to some concerns around a caption in the Punch and Judy case of our Laughing Matters display. Telling the story of British satire and comedy, we will review the relevant label text and update the wording if necessary. Look, who do you agree with? As the V&A sparks outrage by naming Margaret Thatcher on a list of unpopular public figures alongside Hitler and Osama bin Laden, is the former PM a hero or a villain? Peter says, the director of the V&A, Tristram Hunt, is clearly unfit to hold this office and should be fired. Gwen on X says, she'll always be a hero to me. Thatcher saved Britain. Paul says, Thatcher ruined my local economy and we are still skint because she shut down our industry. If you live somewhere unaffected by her policies, then maybe she'd be a hero, but not in my neck of the woods. Well, there we go. Your verdict is now in. 86% of you think that Margaret Thatcher is a hero. 14% of you think that she's a villain. Thank you very much, everybody who took part in that.